Open the gates of castles and fortresses to welcome the Muslims as liberators. Liberators from who? Liberty from who? From Christians who were governing Spain. Why were the Jews so happy about Muslim arrival? According to Zion Zohar, not a Muslim apologist, and up to this moment, I stand by my standard of not quoting one Muslim source. To support my arguments, not one Muslim source. I have been quoting non-stop academic Western scholarship and sources, not one Muslim source. I will not quote a Muslim source because there are people out there and in here who will say Muslim apologists, biased, prejudiced. No, I will insist. And why are these Western academics praising Muslim civilization? Another book, a very important book, although quite old, published in 1913. The book is titled Preaching of Islam, authored by Professor Thomas Walker Arnold. What's his name? Thomas Walker Arnold. Not a Muslim, a philosopher who taught at SOAS, School of Oriental and African Studies. He published a book in 1913 called Preaching of Islam. Anyone who reads that book once in your lifetime will never walk away with the same conclusions ISIS and these Christian missionaries have on Islam. This is why I keep insisting that ISIS and Christian missionaries like Bob are brothers in one faith. What is their faith? They see darkness in Islam. They see hatred in Islam. They see division and unpleasant history in Islam. What we as Muslims and objective Christians and objective Jews see in Islam is 1,000 years of civilization where Jews and Christians coexisted. Now he mentioned, to make my final point, again I want to stick to academic sources. And amazingly, by the grace of Allah, all of these points he mentioned, or he made, I have something to offer in return as my rebuttal. And I will not speak from my mind, from my opinion. I will give you academic sources to go and consult. He mentioned martyrs of Cordoba. Remember that? You remember that? Martyrs of Cordoba. Who were the martyrs of Cordoba? Very good question. And why did he mention them as a case of persecution? Now, Muslims governed parts of Spain for over 7 centuries. And he came up with one case, martyrs of Cordoba. Christians being persecuted by Muslims. And he cannot find any other case. And we will see if he brings something else up. And I still want him to answer my 2 questions. Martyrs of Cordoba, who were they? These were a bunch of extremist Christians who saw Christians in Spain converting to Islam in drives, in their thousands. Christians voluntarily converting to Islam in drives, to an extent that one of the sympathizers of Martyrs of Cordoba, called Paul Alvarez, writes in 850s in Cordoba that Christian youngsters are reading Muslim books. They are inspired by Muslim philosophy. They are reading the Arabic language, they are studying the Arabic, and they can form better poetry in Arabic than the Arabs can. And because of that, many of them are going to their faith because they are deeply inspired by Muslim philosophy, Muslim scholarship, Muslim civilization in general. So the point he was making was that Christian youngsters, they are being influenced by Islamic civilization and they are voluntarily accepting Islam. So the response was, I'm finishing right now, this is my last point. The response was Martyrs of Cordoba. Who are these people? They were a bunch of Christian extremists. What they would do is, they would go to the, you have to be patient because I was completely silent for all that time you were speaking. Now let me finish my last point and you can come back in. Martyrs of Cordoba were a group of people, Christian extremists or Christian ISIS, who got together in Spain and they said, how do we turn the tide of conversion of Christians? What do we do? We cannot possibly, convince these Christian youth or prevent them from becoming Muslims. What do we do? So they came up with an idea. The idea was to do something so severe, so hostile and so extreme that the Muslim state in Spain is forced to persecute us. And we will use that persecution to gain sympathy from Christians. And because of that extreme sympathy, Christians will stop becoming Muslims. So what was the idea? We will insult Muhammad in public places. We will go and insult Muhammad. We will curse Muhammad. So they started doing it. They went to the Muslim courts in front of the judge. They insulted Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No, of course you can. Let me finish. Let me finish. Of course I'm finishing. I'm finishing. It's very important. No, wait. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. You could continue for another 10 minutes because you ran out of substance. It's not my fault. If you have nothing more to say, it's not my fault. I have a lot to say, but I will stop. This is my last point.
You said that.
So martyrs of Cordoba.
I get what you said.
So these people in 1850, from the year 850 to 859, close to 49 people or 50 people were executed by the Muslim courts for insulting the Prophet of Islam, despite the fact the Muslim judges would give them time to recant. Stop it, don't do it. Christians of Cordoba and Christians of Spain collectively condemned this behavior. They said these extremists have nothing to do with us. We are living happily. We have no problems in Spain. These are troublemakers. Okay, I'm finishing. If you want to read an objective work, an objective book on this topic, then there is a book I will recommend, authored by Jazak Allah Khair, and the book is titled Martyrs of Cordoba, and is published by Nebraska University Press.
So,
Nebraska. Okay, again an academic source. Note, an academic source. So you will see the lives of these missionaries. Respond to my point.
Adnan said, do you remember earlier in his nice monologue, he said that no reputable publisher would publish any of the books that I mentioned. They were all written by Islamophobes, and they would not be published by any reputable publisher.
Yes.
That's what he said.
Yes.
He lied to you.
Okay.
The 30-year genocide, Turkey's destruction of its Christian minorities, 1894 to 1924, was published by Harvard University Press.
Okay.
Is that reputable? Of course it is.
Wait, let me check.
No, don't interrupt.
I won't interrupt.
Right, so
If that's the case, I stand
don't
corrected.
interrupt,
I stand corrected.
Adnan. You lied to the people because you're not a historian, you're an apologist.
What's the title of the book?
No, I'm going to continue speaking.
What's the...
Listen. So, he talked about the martyrs of Cordoba. He said that these were extremists. They were insulting Muhammad. And that's why they were killed. So, what he doesn't tell you is that some of the martyrs of Cordoba were actually invited to give their opinion about Muhammad by Muslims under the promise of protection, under the promise that nothing would happen to them. And so they did give their opinion. And then the next day, the same Muslims went and took them to the authorities to be killed. That's actually what happened, but he didn't tell you that. What he didn't tell you is the movement of the martyrs of Cordoba was successful. Not only did it stop the movement of conversions to Islam, but in some cases it actually reversed it. Some of the martyrs of Cordoba were Christians who became Muslims, who were inspired by the martyrs of Cordoba and became Christians again and were killed. But he didn't tell you that. And how was the martyr of Cordoba stopped? This is what happened. The ruling authorities said to the bishops, you either stop this or we wipe out your entire population and we enslave you, every one of you, man, woman and child. That's what happened. But he didn't tell you that either.
Repeat that, sorry.
He didn't tell you that either.
Repeat that, please.
Stop interrupting, Adnan. Now, why didn't he tell you that? Because Adnan is not a historian. Adnan is an apologist. He wants to characterize anyone who tells a history that portrays Islam in an unfavorable light as an Islamophobe. The reality is, go and speak to the Spanish Christians about what they suffered in Spain. Here's some examples. If a Christian was killed, the blood money required for their death was half that required for the murder of a Muslim.
Source.
Furthermore,
Source.
the one I quoted earlier, stop interrupting.
Read it.
Stop interrupting, Adnan. Notice, now that he is stung by historical fact, he can't control himself. Suddenly, he has to interrupt because facts burn you, Adnan. Facts burn.
Read. Read.
So,
Read it.
what happened? What happened?
Read it.
Was that Muslims, as they occupied and dominated the Iberian Peninsula, said that Christian men could not marry Muslim women, but Muslim men could marry Christian women. Is that fair treatment? No. It's still true today. Muslims still practice this, even now. Muslims commanded that churches could not ring their bells. If you think I'm lying, go away and do your research. Adnan is lying. Adnan is lying. Those, control yourself, Adnan.
I'm not talking.
Those that try to characterize the martyrs of Cordoba as extremists, or those of us that simply tell the church's historical experience of being dominated by Islam as Islamophobes, are lying to you because they find the history embarrassing. If you watch this video again on content over everything, all the way through, write down how many historical books I gave as my evidence.
Please do.
They're not all Islamophobes. He wants to characterize them as all Islamophobes. So every Greek historian, every Romanian historian, every Serbian historian, every Croatian historian, every Spanish historian, every Albanian Christian historian that portrays the Islamic Caliphate as unjust, unfair, cruel, savage, and a brutal occupying force, Adnan dismisses them all with an emotive phrase: Islamophobe. Why does he do that? Because his argument, he knows, fails when you go away and research it. So he's hoping to clinch the argument with emotions, not facts. He wants to slur me and those who simply talk about Christian history from a Christian perspective. Because in his supremacist worldview, this apologist for Islamic supremacism does not believe that Christians have the right to tell their own history. He thinks that anyone who does so is guilty of a thought crime because it's fashionable to portray critics of Islam in that way. Notice, I'm criticizing Islamic history. I'm not calling for prejudice against Muslims today. He can't show any evidence that I have. This is a debate about history. So why is he slurring anyone who disagrees with him as an Islamophobe? Because he knows when you look into it yourself, you'll realize I'm telling the truth and he is telling a lie. Now, let us be clear. The reason why I speak about this is simply because I believe as a Christian I have the right to speak about my own history from my own sources, written by my own people. If that makes me guilty of a thought crime, so be it. I don't care. I'm not going to be silenced by his motive, pejorative, emotional terms and insults. I am criticizing the Islamic Caliphate. And if you think that I'm being unfair, compare the Ottoman Caliphate to ISIS. The Ottoman Caliphate invaded lands that were not their own. ISIS invaded lands that were not their own. The Ottoman Caliphate kidnapped Christian children. ISIS kidnapped Christian children. The Ottoman Caliphate enslaved people. ISIS enslaved people. The Ottoman Caliphate imposed the jizya on Christians. ISIS imposed the jizya on Christians. The Ottomans reduced Christians to the status of dhimmis. ISIS reduced Christians to the status of dhimmis. The Ottomans confiscated Christian property, like Constantinople's Hagia Sophia, having butchered every man, woman and child in the church on the day of its conquest. Something he said I had no evidence for. Go and look it up yourselves. ISIS went and confiscated Christian churches. The Ottoman Caliphate executed and threatened to execute anyone who left their version of Islam. The Ottoman Caliphate killed those who left Islam. I am not making this up. My comparison is a fair historical comparison. Now, does that mean that the next Muslim you meet in your workplace is suddenly guilty of being a terrorist supporting ISIS sympathizer? Absolutely not. No, not at all. But what it does mean is that we have a historical testimony of how Muslims through history have believed that Islam should be interpreted and applied that contradicts the narrative that we have been given by the liberal media today and by apologists for Islamic supremacism like Adnan Rashid, a man who has, according to many, and I've heard the video, attended meetings by Islamic supremacists and ISIS supporters. His voice can be heard in the tapes. He says that they were made up. I've seen the video myself. The voice that I hear in those recordings sounds exactly like Adnan's does. So, just be aware of what kind of apologist is making the argument today. Now, what should we do? We should tell the truth. That's all I'm asking for. Tell the truth and accept the reality that whether you look at the Caliphate in Spain or the Ottoman Caliphate, the Christians have suffered persecution at the hands of Sharia law and Muslims who apply Sharia law. It's not wrong of me to state that fact. It's not wrong of me to tell a history rooted in our own experience as a people. Adnan wants to villainize that because it tells an uncomfortable truth about Islam. And my question to all of you Muslims and to all of you liberals, if my facts make you feel uncomfortable, perhaps your conscience is telling you you need a better religion. Because over 1,000 years of Islamic history contradicts this apologist. You think I'm lying, Adnan? Go and speak, and I ask this of all of you. Go and speak to the Assyrian Christians.
Go.
You can find them.
Go.
Yes, go.
Go, please.
Quiet, Adnan. Go. Go and speak.
Go, man.
Adnan, be quiet.
Okay.
Go.
Get lost, guys.
Go. Go and speak to the Assyrian Christians.
Yeah, don't read history, but go and speak to them.
Yes.